Welcome to the PGN Podcast. With this podcast, we're looking to normalise the conversation around flooding. What happens behind the scenes, lifting the curtains on the mystery that can sometimes come into play when you're either involved with flooding or trying to protect your home. We're talking to some experts in the industry and relaying some of the experiences we heard from some communities. Hopefully, after our series, you'll have a bit more information to help yourself or help others in an emergency where flooding is involved.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the PGN Podcast. So I'm Carl Hodgson and I present this with Meshi, Taka.
Hi.
So today's episode is all about 360-degree resilience. Flooding is becoming more frequent. We're getting heavier rainfall events, and within the UK, there's about 6.4 million people live in areas at risk of flooding of some source. 1.5 million of those are vulnerable people also. So beyond the financial costs and the damages that occur from a flooding event, there are a number of other impacts such as mental health, economics, etc. And it becomes not just a problem that affects those who have actually been flooded, but it affects everyone. And what we'd like to do here is talk about how we can all be a bit more empowered by finding solutions and setting the case for a more holistic approach, and ensuring people are getting better informed. So this should hopefully give a good context for debate with some very interesting panelists.
Yes, we have two guests with us today. Hi, Karen. Welcome. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Meshi. Hi. Thank you for asking me. I'm looking forward to this. I'm Karen Daglish and I am the Stronger Shores delivery manager. And that is basically managing a project that's northeast wide, and we're looking specifically at coastal resilience and adaptation to climate change through how some of the habitats that we have along our coastline, such as kelp, oyster seagrass, and what role they can play in helping the communities become that little bit more resilient to the impacts of flooding and coastal erosion.
Team Kelp.
Yeah, team. yeah, me too, I think.
Hi, Andy. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Meshi. I'm Andy Tweddle. I work for Stantec, so I've been there for about 17 years. I'm the regional lead for the hydraulic modelling team. I think over that period, I've been involved in quite a lot of different projects, flooding projects, but kind of leading into more recent projects around storm overflows and environmental improvements. Lots of that in the press at the moment, but also around partnership work and flood risk reduction and IDP as well, collaborative work, and then trying to make the most of our investments in the Northeast.
Brilliant. Well, it should be a great conversation though. So, Carl?
Yeah, so I think first question to yourselves at the table here is how would you describe your role in flood management, and have you ever had any personal experience of flooding as well?
I suppose my role is largely through the understanding of why it happened, and then ultimately trying to, understand and manage the risk in a financially plausible way, I suppose, is a simple way to put it. But I haven't had any direct or personal experience of flooding, but have had a lot of contact with local residents and customers, and either by door knocking or site visits or through customer events. And I think, I can certainly see that it's very emotional. It's got a long-term effect on people. You can see that in the way that people talk to you and explain, and they really want to tell you about what they experienced. And I think after the event itself as well, the thing that really makes me and us want to do a great job is, seeing that long-term effect as well. Sleeping at night when it's raining, or if someone's away and they know that it's forecast to rain, it's really quite a worrying place to be. It really does drive us to do a good job.
And I think as well, personally, being involved on that response side as well, when you hear the rain as an officer dealing with that keeps you up at night. I've been at points 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning where I've been checking the the CCTVs on sort of roadways, just seeing what roads are like and things like that. So it's kind of it plays on us because we're in a role here where I think we want to help people, we want to make a difference, and you know, you do worry a lot when that happens. And yeah, so Karen, yourself, you know, how do you fit into the flood management jigsaw?
Family.
Well, there's that. Yeah, I'll touch on that next. But I think really through my role, it's about talking to communities that live at the coast around, you know, coastal erosion and how we can manage that into the future, and what their perceptions are of that, and looking at coastal communities in particular and being more typically deprived than other communities, and how they feel that flooding and erosion will impact on their lives. But also that the project's very much interested in modelling and looking ahead and looking to the future. So while we might not be seeing some impacts that other areas of the country are around erosion, certainly going forward into the future, if we don't try and become more resilient and model and predict some of these changes that are going to happen, then we can't be ready, and we can't give people the tools they need to be more prepared as well. So that's probably where I fit into it professionally, is looking ahead and looking at resilience and trialling and piloting and building that evidence base for the Environment Agency so we can have all the options on the table. I guess moving to one side from that, maybe similar to Andy, I don't feel like I've had any direct impact because my house hasn't been flooded, but saying that, quite recently, my daughter's school was closed for a number of weeks. You probably recall Great North Run Day. I think if there's any example, you know, we can look at today, it's just the impact of a 30-minute storm or something on, just by pure chance, happening at the end of the Great North Run. Obviously, a huge impact on people leaving South Shields to get back to Newcastle or wherever else they were going on to. But my daughter's school in Gateshead actually did have a flooding event on that day and was closed for 3 weeks following that. So actually, the level of anxiety that evening when the rumours started, and this was, you know, we'll maybe talk about comms later, but social media fueled anxiety, I think, you know, a lot of it, because you hear the rumours, you check.
Panic as well.
You're like, the kids are panicking, everyone's wanting to go down, look at the school. But just that sudden impact of having that rain and then going, oh, right, is the school flooded? That's been an ongoing thing now because, as you know, we've had a couple of storms since then and we've had heavy rain. And so you're immediately thinking, oh my God, is the school going to be flooded again? And I think those few days following that event, as a parent, it took you straight back to home learning anxiety that you didn't even know you had. So you didn't realise you had some PTSD from like COVID home learning, but you were straight back in it. You were like, why am I feeling so churned up inside? And you're like, oh, that's why. It's because now I only had one child off with that school. So, and luckily at an age where they could step straight back into the measures that were already in place. Imagine if you had younger year 7s where it was the first week, well, I think they'd been at school for a full week, that would have just caused unknown levels of anxiety, which was reflected in some of the conversations we were having.
Yeah, settling into a new school, a new environment.
It would have been
as
awful.
Well, yeah. And I think as well, it's interesting where you've talked about the Great North Run storm event. Yeah. Then we've had Storm Babette and Kieran after. Yeah. I was on holiday for that. I didn't know that. But what I think is important to know here is the difference between a summer storm and a winter storm. Yeah. So your summer is your cloudburst event. You have very short, very intense rainfall. So that happened on Great North Run Day, and then Storm Babette and Storm Kieran, you're hammered with rainfall over a longer period of time. So, you know, it shows you the difference of an impact that a longer and a shorter term period would have. So again, looking back to, say, Thunder Thursday back in 2012, the areas that were impacted in the region were significantly different to those that were impacted on, say, Storm Desmond and Storm Frank. But it doesn't matter what storm or what type of storm happens. As someone who's at risk or been a victim of flooding in the past, you are going to get that anxiety every time you're aware there's a weather warning or a named storm comes about. And, you know, national media, the way they put it on particular, you know, channels and streams, and, you know, this is going to be the worst rainfall that ever hits and things like that. And you know, it's kind of there's a lot of scaremongering, and that doesn't play. Personally, I don't feel that plays well to people's anxiety.
Yeah.
I think that's it's one of the aspects that we've been looking at recently, but for not flooding absolutely, but in relation to it, is how climate change is going to affect that perspective as well seasonally.
Yeah.
Winter, summer, intensity increases. Winter, maybe a greater depth of rainfall, and how that sort of plays out in catchments, and then the sorts of things that we are able to do with that and how it's changing.
We have really good technical understanding of what it takes to engineer a solution. We are getting better understanding on nature-based solutions. With regards to the future, what you're saying there, Andy, about the impact of climate change on us as a community, on us as a society, is perhaps look at how we're resilient as a whole.
So, Andy, I think what's a really good question to follow Meshi's comments there is, can you explain what the modelling process is, and then how climate change is included as part of that as well?
Yeah, so I think there's, we're trying to build a computerized representation of reality. So we build what we call a hydraulic model. It will have if it's an urban case, it'll have the contributions to the drainage system, whatever that may be. It could be water courses and streams in some cases. It could be highway drainage systems, roof drainage. It's collected. We represent the capacity of the drainage system below ground, and in recent years above ground too. We can test that hydraulic model. We can stretch it. What happens if we do this? What happens if we test this sort of rainfall? We can start to sort of see what the likely performances are, and then, like you say, use it as a predictive tool.
Yeah. So as part of that modelling process, you'd consider things like road type and kind of how the water would behave on say a road as opposed to a field.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, like you said earlier, maybe the difference between winter and summer, and starting to bring in some of those different effects of runoff. So what happens when a permeable surface gets wetter and wetter and wetter and starts to make a contribution, versus that sort of urban environment as well, and how do they come together as well?
Yeah. So what, and climate change as well, how's that considered within the modelling process?
Yeah, so for flooding, we generally uplift our rainfall to try and sort of anticipate what might be the change in rainfall at depth and intensity. But recently we've been looking at rainfall series. So we have rainfall rain gauges across the region. We can take that and we can actually test our models to see how close our predictions were against what was observed.
Yeah.
And really build up that confidence, and then use that to sort of have a look at the future too. I think there's other changes as well, aren't there? There's growth and urban creep.
Urban creep, which is additional hard standing area in urban areas. How much of an impact does that have on the sewer network, for example?
It does. I think naturally the amount of change plateaus. Once people pave their front gardens or whatever we're doing, or build an extension, there is a limitation to it. But obviously in different types of area, different types of catchment, it still does play out in terms of contributing to change.
We need more housing, we need more infrastructure. And one of the conversations that keeps coming up more and more is, well, where's it all going to go? We have stretched infrastructure, particularly in the sense of urbanization or re-urbanization, where you potentially don't have space to build more drainage systems. And how can we use the intelligence that you have to be able to optimize?
And I think that's the power of hydraulic modelling. It gives you the chance to understand that and test it. I think we have this idea around greenfield runoff. So it's kind of what we might have thought to be a runoff rate from the space before it was developed. I think the slightly less defined or discussed element is how you change when it happens. So maybe that sort of peak response happened in 6 hours, 12 hours previously. Now it's happening in 30 minutes, 1 hour. And how does that sort of change how it interacts with the surrounding system?
So I have one for you actually, because you're the expert modeler in the house. So let me adjust for this one. We've been talking about other ways of flood risk management, and one of those is around nature-based solutions.
I think the nature-based solutions approach is a journey. Mm-hmm. I think that we've probably gone from a relatively hard engineered place. We generally used concrete storage tanks to store excess volume to save properties from flooding, moving into, I guess, an aspiration of pure nature-based. But I think it is a journey. I think we still need some engineering in there. Maybe the landscape in which we're doing something might warrant some hard engineering, but also we are still providing that philosophical change to a nature-based way. So it's kind of trying to return the catchment to how it operated before we interfered, I suppose.
Naturally.
Yeah. So can we use permeable areas to act like sponges? Can we collect rainfall response and slow it down? And what that means is it takes the pressure off in terms of the drainage systems, and as we move down the urban catchment, maybe we can take a little bit of pressure off there. So yeah, it's all about slowing things down and trying to return it to that sort of natural response. But I think it is a journey.
Over to you, Karen. So you've heard, I think with Andy's predominantly around designing the solutions, and then we talked about returning or getting as close to our natural systems as possible. And how does the work you do kind of feed into that?
Yeah. So I think when we talk about using, what we have naturally, so be it different habitats, different things that may grow and that we can use, it's about not talking about them in isolation so much for one use or one reason only. So, we look at, so if we had a seagrass meadow or a kelp bed, or even more, something like some salt marsh or something, maybe it's on the estuary, it would provide this benefit, but also XYZ benefits as well. So we're really interested in looking at what is the value, it's described as like natural capital, of the different habitats that provide a service, be it, it might be for flood defence, for natural drainage, but it's also for storing carbon, it's also for well-being, it's also for leisure recreation. So not only thinking about how a nature-based solution, so how we can use some of these habitats that we have for an engineering purpose, because natural engineers, but also it will bring you these other benefits. We're also really conscious not to sell them as this will solve all the problems that we have.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, seagrass, if you can imagine a grass meadow on land and the root systems that it have, and it stabilizes that topsoil, does exactly the same, out in the shallow waters. It will stabilize that layer of sediment and stop it moving about so much in a storm. Kelp, you'll get kelp washed up on the beach after storms. It's not going to always stay in place, but it does provide other benefits, and it will mean that we can bounce back a bit quicker. The health of, all the different things that depend on that kelp, that seaweed to live, will be much more resilient to come back after a storm event. So we're really conscious not to say, let's plant acres and acres and acres of seagrass, let's have the North Sea full of oysters again, and that will solve all the problems that we've got, because it won't, but it is part of the solution for slowing down the wave energy, taking the edge off, if you like, those bigger, more impactful waves. We saw the top of South Shields Lighthouse come off.
Yeah.
Kelp, but probably wouldn't have stopped that happening, but it does provide a healthier environment to come back to.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Manage expectations, I think, is a big part of our messaging.
It's a really good way to think. I think, we do quantify the benefits of what we do, and as a comparator to alternatives, but also to justify the investment as well. I think sometimes our challenge is that we quite often need a definitive output to a project.
Yeah.
And an investment. We need to, make sure that we've done something, but also what can we bring outside of that as well? What additional benefits can we bring?
I think, straight away, obviously my own background, I haven't had much experience with coastal. So I find your project really interesting. But I think what's key here is you're looking at multifunctional benefits the same way I would for surface water schemes, which is brilliant. But also as well, looking at Project Groundwater Northumbria, that main focus is groundwater. Obviously, the underground activity is not localized to one particular small local area, and the project reaches out right across the region. Is Stronger Shores doing that?
Yeah, so we are regional based as well. So, we'll look at the northeast coastline as a whole, from the border with Scotland, particularly interested in the seagrass habitat we've got at Holy Island, Lindisfarne. That's our last stronghold, if you like, of a really healthy functioning seagrass meadow, all the way down to somewhere like Skinning Grove, going down towards Redcar and Cleveland and the North Yorkshire border. Skinning Grove, in and of itself has flooding issues when there's been rainfall events, and then it has it coming from the coastline as well. So yeah, we're definitely looking regionally across the whole of the northeast coastline, but also nationally as well. If we start to look at, okay, we want more seagrass, brilliant. How are we going to do that? We can't do that unless we work nationally with other projects that also need to work with seagrass and have seagrass seeds and things like that. So yeah, definitely, you can't, I think, look at things in isolation. You have to look at nationally, especially with, in the marine environment. We're 10 years young in many respects with some of the restoration schemes that are starting to happen. We don't have that wealth of experience and knowledge that you might have, maybe with groundwater or flooding that occurs on land. So we're still very much learning from each other, but it's a lovely collaborative space as well to be working in.
Yeah. I mean, we've, at the very start, when we talked about that personal relationship when it comes to flooding, we came across this study that was published in 2020. It's the English National Study of Flooding and Health. It's a report and focused in the South, but it highlighted an adverse impact on mental health amongst those whose lives were disrupted by flooding and those whose homes were flooded. So two groups there, because you were clear that my home didn't flood, but I was disrupted. The increase in mental health problems could persist for 3 years. Those who experienced persistent flood-related damage to their homes and had associated worse mental health issues, outcomes. And some of the key factors identified included things like the depth of flooding, the risk of displacement, the financial impact, insurance issues, and things like that. And I guess, that's the south of England, but it's very familiar, isn't it, to some of the people that you've probably met and spoken to. I know when I was in Northumbrian Water and we were talking about property and flood resilience, then people were like, what's going to happen to my insurance? And talking to people and offloading on you was also part of the journey, I found, when they got to speak to somebody that one-on-one, kind of, this person cares about what I'm going through, and they might not have all the answers, but they're going to just listen to what I have to say. Is that something you've experienced as well, Andy?
Absolutely. And I think, there is a huge amount of value, isn't there, in our homes. And I think sentimentally, economically, in lots of different ways. And I think it's kind of, I haven't experienced flooding firsthand, but the thing that you think about is when someone's lost all of their sort of family photos because it's on the bottom shelf of a cabinet. So it does make you it does bring home the sort of the behaviours that you've got as well, and what would it be like to experience that in your home too? Sort of feeling unsettled, being displaced. It could take months and months to get back in. It really is highly disruptive.
Some of these schemes can take years, especially the major capital projects. What is the experience then when something finally gets done and you go to the same people and you talk to them? What's that journey like then at the end of the whole thing?
Yeah, we have to communicate, I think.
Yeah.
I think we have to take them on the journey. I think we have to be open. We said it before we started, but we have matured from putting technical drawings on a wall where everyone,
just lying
is slightly baffled by what they're looking at, to sort of landscape architecture and
Pictorials
having a
something.
much more friendly format to be observed and received by that. But it does take a long time too. We want to make sure we get it right, but the whole process is quite time consuming. Unfortunately, sometimes we can't always guarantee that we're going to be able to do something. I think
that's how I've kind of made a point there to say it's more about the reduction of risk as opposed to the prevention. We can never control how much water comes out of the sky, and in essence, every single scheme or solution we put in is designed to a certain standard. Part of that obviously is based on a study and an appraisal, an economic appraisal. But how do we quantify those sort of those intangible damages? You can replace settees, you can repair homes, but that mental health impact, the cost of evacuation, things like that, how is that incorporated within the process? And
how we
is it
work?
Yeah. Is it the right way to do it?
It's one way of doing it.
Yeah.
I think, unfortunately, in some ways, we love to have a pound sign cost compared to a pound sign benefit. And it's that sort of, both sides of the scales that's going to persuade people to invest in a certain project. There are evidence bases and studies that try and put a monetized value on such things.
Yeah.
I'm certain we've got a long way to go too in better understanding it. But the sort of the brutality of the economics is probably required just to justify the project. But I don't know. It's we do have a way of doing it, but whether or not we truly understand it or can give it the the justified attention that those people suffering flooding want.
I think, on your point though, because I've always found it interesting. So we talk about flood alleviation schemes and it feels impactful. It's like, yes. And I guess for me, my question is there value in us revisiting how we communicate in that sense, the language we use? Because Carl is right. It's we'll talk about resilience, and even when we do investment, is to be clear. So that kind of you're managing the expectations there. Mm-hmm. So the expectation you are defense wall and it will never overtop again, or the water might not get higher. We hear it far too often. So it's actually a reality that a lot of people think, oh, you did a massive project, you dug up the roads, or you built this really massive wall. And it doesn't matter that it was a really scary event or really extraordinary, but I expected that wall to provide me infinite protection. And is that because we still use things like defense and protection, and perhaps we need to consider or revisit how we communicate what we're doing?
Yeah, and I think in some ways it's neat, isn't it, to have a river, a wall, and some properties.
That clear line between it. Yeah,
you can see the connection, but actually, what we find is common now is the cause is very complicated. There isn't always a visual or direct link between what's causing the problem or where the rainfall
source.
is landing and the source of the response and the receptors to that.
Yeah,
and I think that sort of dissects the clarity in terms of what we're doing as well.
And sort of post incidents, particularly on Sunday, Thursday, I visited, probably hundreds of residents, and a lot of them were like, I shouldn't flood, I don't live on a floodplain, or I don't live
on a
next to
hill.
a river.
Yeah, I live on top of a hill.
Yeah, but there's the source, so wherever rainfall obviously falls, then you've got your pathway, which is where it travels, and then your receptor, which is where the water ends up. And urbanization can change that from its natural source. And again, it's part of what we need to do is educate people and communities on that. And obviously there's a lot of things like surface water maps that can help people find out if they're at risk or not. But yeah, it's something I think that's a key element of what we need to do as an industry is better educate people on that modern water cycle.
Yeah, but it's also what you touched on, is normalising the conversation. So not having to go to a technical event or where there's a bunch of engineers talk about it, is going to a community event and just putting up a tent and go, did you know, with a little model, don't you think?
Yeah, I think myself being relatively new, if you like, to this sector, certainly the flood coastal risk management sector, I had to even Google what FCERM meant at the beginning of the year, for example.
You've got to Google a lot of acronyms.
Now you have to tell everyone what FCERM is.
So flood coastal erosion risk management. Is that right?
Yes.
Good.
FCERM. Yes.
I know. Which wasn't necessarily a bad thing. So I came into this world from managing environmental conservation type projects and different funding programs. So fell into this world, if you like, and thoroughly enjoying it. But yes, the language, it was a lot to understand, especially when in meetings with the Environment Agency and the other projects that receive the same funding that our project does. It was a constant having Google open, doing this, and then writing notes, then going away and teaching myself, which, is absolutely fine. But it does make you remember that everything, I have to translate a lot of things. And so what on earth do other people need to do who aren't in this world every day? So how we've approached it through Stronger Shores, very much based on what, other projects I've done in the past, go to where people are. So the classic example from this year was Hartlepool Tall Ships. Packed event, families there, everyone there, great few days, 4 days, really full on. We were pitched up next to like the brownies and not the brownies uniform, the brownie food, like brownies and flapjacks and all the nice cake stands, should I say. Yeah. So a brilliant spot for people who are, while they made their mind up if they got a brownie or a flapjack, the kids could come and have a play in our wave tank that we had that allowed them to create waves, drop in some habitats, a bit of an exaggerated way of doing it, but they dropped in the habitats. They could see that it did reduce the waves, and the Lego land on the other end of the wave tank was, protected. So quite a simplified way of doing things, but it was really, really effective. And in fact, we've done like almost road shows this year, if you like, going to where these events are, because we're also, we really, really enjoy doing that. So we absolutely go to where people are and just talk to people. And you'd be surprised how much people do understand and are incredibly supportive of, what nature can do.
Yeah.
But, then we do now want to start doing more meaningful targeted engagement as well. But the same approach, but just look at actually where are the big schemes going to be built along the northeast coast, alongside where some of these habitats are going to be restored or, monitored, that we can join up with the Environment Agency and work together.
Yeah.
In our communications.
So you mentioned there, obviously, being the perfect position is between a donut stand and a flapjack stand or whatever. But I think what was a key element there is, you had interactive things as part of your display, as part of your stand. And, they'll appeal probably to children more than they do adults. Well, I'm a big kid.
How many people were like looking at the wave tank and going, can I have a go?
I think from a comms and engagement perspective, how important is it to get kids involved and engaged and interested? And how much of that do you think transfers through to the adults, to the parents?
I think it definitely does. And I think having interactive resources and having more things made for us currently enables the kids to come, get wet, do things. You have a couple of people, someone then talks to the parents.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a win-win, a bit of a no-brainer really. But also going out and working with different groups who wouldn't necessarily be involved in discussions, consultations. So going into, people who work with refugees, asylum seekers, for example, or other groups that traditionally would feel removed, going to where they are, looking at what their sessions are, how can we be part of those. Other projects I've worked on, we've taken groups on coastal walks, we've had dance projects, we've had plays made, music made, etc. So you have to look at what works for them, I guess, and then, how can you fit into that? And not be too heavy-handed either, just have fun.
I mean, you've all heard the story about my son and dinosaurs, right? But I was a person where, for the most part, my only two dinosaurs were Brontosaurus and Tyrannosaurus Rex, because everyone knows what the two are. My son is obsessed with dinosaurs. And on any given day, I can name 100 dinosaurs. And I guess the point there is that young children tend to be a lot more curious And there is a learning process where if your child is interested in that, you tend to be interested in that as well. How many times have we sat and watched Peppa Pig and go, why am I sat here watching Peppa Pig? Because your child is watching it. And there's a learning process because they come back to you, they throw facts at you, they go, do you remember where this happened? And I think there is an avenue to engagement, particularly tapping into family dynamics, which I feel actually that plan to start with the kids is a very effective way to get.
I think we've done it with sort of health eating, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we can give information to adults and parents, but actually, is it more effective to go direct to the children? And
I wish I ate as healthy as my son.
But I mean, you could say that about, let's say, a water butt on a property. If they go home and nag their parents for a water butt.
That's what we need. We need water butts on Peppa Pig.
Well, actually, which is the show with the Go Jetters?
Oh, yeah.
Go Jetters did an episode on fatbergs.
It did, yes.
And I was sat there watching it with my son. Fatbergs. And I was like, there's water companies that spend a lot of money trying to tell you not to put grease and whatever in down the pipes, and Go Jetters in 2 minutes got my son and got me. Fair enough, I already worked in the sector, but the point is they got buy one get one free because I sat right next to him watching Go Jetters. And I think one of the opportunities that we sometimes miss is we for example, advertisement in this country, we knock companies for promoting certain things to kids, and is obviously terrible because of the negative impact that it will have. Because you go into a shop and they put all the, again, dinosaurs. They put the really attractive dinosaurs in the lower shelf.
Yeah.
And he goes, that's the one I want. I'm looking at the price going, oh my God.
Level. Yeah.
And I guess if you flip that and you go, well, that's the power of that young person in your life. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about education. We're talking about skills for the future. If we get them early about very important real life issues about our future, their future, they have the power to influence the people with the money in the bank and the people who can go out and buy the water butts and put in flood doors and all that kind of stuff. If they care, they'll make us care as well.
Yeah, and I think, there's the educational Minecraft, which I don't know if everyone's aware of.
The Environment Agency.
Environment Agency have developed basically a version of Minecraft where you've got to try and stop a town from flooding by doing various things. And I think that's been quite something in it.
Idea,
it's a brilliant idea.
I mean, I've got a 9 and 10-year-old and I can't get them off Minecraft. Yeah. So I think it is a very clever approach.
Instead of fighting the system, actually expand what that system can do and bring value to it, which I think it's just remarkable. But since you mentioned FCRM, and you went to all the effort to tell us what's about, because I wasn't going to try and say that, it can be a mouthful. So the strategy, which is essentially the national strategy, has it basically has a long-term ambition to enhance resilience, adaptability, to effectively confront the difficulties presented by climate change, including nature-based solutions. So we've kind of talked about the power of children, but my question is, is there a business case to actually empower communities as a whole so they become an active contributor towards the strategy?
Yeah, I think we're very conscious, when we do speak to people. And bear in mind, this year has been very high turnover, quick conversations, busy events. Mm-hmm. But other projects I've worked on in the past, we're very, very conscious of speaking to people about what they can do. And one of my biggest bugbears, if you like, is wet wipes down the toilet, which I guess has an impact on all the different things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it happens frequently, and I believe now you can pinpoint down to individual toilets almost where they come from. But so I'll say, well, if I could ask everyone to do one thing, it would be don't flush your wet wipe down the toilet, even if it does say flushable. Yeah. Because that's a load of nonsense, basically. And I went into, it was a college, a local college a couple of years back, and talked to the tourism students about the coastline. I was working on the Durham coastline at the time. And we finished with this, what can you all do yourselves? And they were really surprised. They were like, but it says flushable. But I didn't realise it did this and did that. And from my point of view, it was like whenever we do beach cleans and you pull apart some seaweed, 50% of it can be wet wipe that's, come down the drains, gone out to sea, washed back up in certain areas on that coastline that's known for, where the waves end up, along with fishing tackle line, etc. So that's something you can just really easily do. And I think giving people those options, and quite often they'll say to us, well, I know we can do X, Y, Z. And, just talking through, well, if you did this, that means, not only would we stop some of the flooding through the drains, it wouldn't be washed up on beaches, it then wouldn't reduce what the birds can eat on the beach, kind of thing. Making it mean something, we found, well, hopefully is quite effective. So just always leaving a conversation with what you can do as well.
The web wipes is a good one though, because I remember when I first went to Greece, my first summer holiday as a grown up, and I think someone said to me, the one thing you need to know about Greece is you don't put anything. Yes, yeah. And so it's like a rule. And as someone who comes from an environment and society where we, like you said, wet wipes and all sorts, it was very clear. There was never, oh, maybe. It was, this is what you do. So how can we learn some of those skills? Because we're invested in, getting people to agree to or to consider. But is it more of a case of zero tolerance? This is not acceptable.
It could be, I suppose, in the carrot and stick approaches.
Yeah.
I think we tend to try the carrot first, don't we?
Yeah. And
but yeah, there might be a point where it needs to be mandated. I suppose we cut out smoking in pubs, didn't we? You maybe would have thought that was possible.
Yeah, it seemed unbelievable at the time
Yeah.
to do it.
So it is plausible, yeah. I think there is an education piece as well.
Yeah.
I think you have to get the buy-in, obviously. But yeah, I think, it could be anything from stopping sales or, banning it altogether.
And I think obviously in the recent times, there's been a lot of negative press towards water companies with things like CSOs and spills and things like that. But, in the defence of the sewer companies here, they only have a legal duty to take our wastewater. And if there's misuse of the sewer network, public sewer network, where people are putting wet wipes down or fat oils and greases, etc., that becomes a societal problem, not just a problem of the water companies. And can we get to a point here where we all sign a pledge, and just to say we aren't going to misuse the sewers?
It's far too easy to go, it's not my problem. Northumbrian Water doing pipe.
Yeah.
They've done a number of promotions around not to put fats, oils and grease. Now they've talked about bin the wipe. That's a very long-standing campaign.
Yeah.
And many water companies, water and sewage companies across the UK have done that as well. The same message you're saying, like the whole marine conservation, and I've done beach cleans. Beach cleans are like a national thing, like every year, multiple events, and we all kind of go out in teams and we go out and we clean all these different things that should not be in the system. And I appreciate that, yes, education, but at what point do you go, right, okay,
Enforcement.
there's a greater good here.
Yeah.
The cigarettes and the smoking is a good example.
I saw a great share on social media where there was a little sign next to a gully and it said, goes to the sea.
Yeah.
And I think
That would be great.
that was just a really powerful thing to me, to sort of bring that home to people.
There's in London, they've done something similar that tried to brand it in some respects like London on Sea, to make that connection that you live on an estuary. It is tidal, obviously. It's evident. You see it with your own eyes twice a day in the Thames, but just make that connection with anything that goes in the Thames ends up at sea. Anything that the drain sewers can't handle goes out to sea.
Yeah.
So just to make people aware that they live on a tidal estuary,
Yeah.
and that they're directly connected to the marine environment.
That's it. It might be an urban environment, but it still integrates with a natural environment. And what Andy said there before, I think just a simple fish, a spray paint tablet of a fish, and you can just go around all your gullies and spray that. People would, and that's a very cost-effective way to do it. And I think that is something, again, as a region we could potentially look at delivering in the future. But just to nip back in here, Andy, I've got one more question. Have you heard of the porcupine?
No, Northumbrian water porcupine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what that is, and it's getting back, Karen, to your wet wipe thing.
Okay.
So what Northumbrian Water have got this device, and it's
Visualize the porcupine, by the way.
It's basically sort of a metal ball with lots of little points coming out. So they put that down into a sewer, and it'll catch a wet wipe, and then they'll say, right, well, we know it's coming from here. We'll move it up to the next, and just trace it upstream to see where those wet wipes are coming from, and basically, they can use that point, so we'll get it localized to a point of maybe 10 or 12 properties, and then they can go out and individually engage with those properties. So we are aware that things like that are getting dealt with within our region, and I think that's a really positive thing. Because the more we solve these problems caused by misuse or lack of education, the less we have to spend as a region on repairing or fixing these problems that are created.
It diverts resources into things that we don't need to do.
Yeah, and then that resource can be spent on longer term capital solutions. And, the more these sewers are blocked, the more we are reliant on CSOs and those spills are happening.
I think it's a similar argument for flooding, isn't it? The dissection between flushing a toilet and what happens thereafter. And also, collecting rainfall. Yeah. Lots of what we do in a catchment, from farming to forestry to our own properties, is about getting it away as fast as possible. And I think that sort of philosophy we are in terms of natural flood management and engagement with farmers. Can we plough the field perpendicular and stop it from running off? Can we provide attenuation areas or check dams in rivers or whatever we can do? Yeah. Forestry too, but also in terms of our own properties. What can we do to sort of capture what we collect? Yeah. Reuse it, but also to slow it down as well.
But there's a level of, there's two parts to it. I think as a society, we just think we can buy away other things. Just build bigger and better, or I pay my council tax, so therefore this should go away, or I pay my sewage bill, so why am I flooding? And there's a kind of a bit where you can't literally pay your way out of this, and kind of taking ownership of, like you're saying, rainfall is a resource in its own right. But we live in a country with a 99-point-something% secure water supply, particularly up here. We all just most of us turn our taps, and good quality portable water runs out of it. And we don't think twice about how we use that water. We use that water for everything. We drink with it, we cook with it, we wash our floors with it, we wash our cars with it. And it's like, it's normal that we'll take good quality water for drinking and wash our cars with.
Water if it's been through a treatment process as well.
Yes, energy intensive treatment process. And yet when it rains, we just go away, go into a gully and go away as quickly as possible. Why don't we have water bots? And water bots are not new. They've been around for over a decade. Why is it not more normalized for you to just go down to your B&Q, pay 20, 30 quid for a simple water bot? Why are we still building houses without those kind of fundamental systems integrated into the houses?
We were talking about resilience earlier, and I think in terms of messaging to the public, we're going to be beaten at some point. Everything we do, the performance is going to be beaten. I think how fast we recover from that is interesting, and I think that's the thing that we need to try and get across here. We do have a responsibility, and then coming back to ownership and engagement with local residents, if we can. I'm thinking about a couple of projects where we did engage the local residents. I think we had a village green that was there, but we actually put it back better. We did planting and walkways, and then it was another project, an IDP project where we put floating islands on the lake, and it really did bring that engagement and ownership and responsibility and all those things.
And I think as well, kind of the project I've got coming forward now, when they're going through the planning process, we need biodiversity net gain. So we need
Yeah.
10% enhancement on whatever we do. And that should be for anything that needs planning permission now. So looking at things like blue-green infrastructure or nature-based solutions, that's going to be a critical part of the planning process. And, you know, I think it's making us change how we approach schemes as engineers. And I think that's critical to how we move forward on this.
But surely it's the residents and the community who know that area and know what happens when better than anybody. I mean, you may have your models and your plans and drawings and stuff, but it's like at the coast, it's the fishermen, it's the people who use those areas for the livelihoods. They're the ones that you go to. They're the ones that will say, oh yeah, you might think it's that because your map says that, but actually ground truthing, it's actually this that happens. And that's what to me is really important.
And we think our projects take a long time, but actually it's not a long time in the lifespan of people living in those communities. And I think I was going to say earlier, you know, another way maybe to express from a technical language is, you know, how many times in your life does this happen? And if we can get it beyond a lifespan and out of living memory, or just once, as opposed to lots and lots of times, I think that's a really powerful way to express it too.
Yeah.
It could be one massive event, or it could be a lifetime of slowly chipping away at something that happens, but not to such a big degree that your life's on hold, but just that chipping away must be exhausting as well on your mental health.
Yeah.
See, we can go on forever.
I know.
Honestly, you have no idea. It's just so much to cover, but we are going to try and close out proceedings. So we have a special question, and it's around, again, we're talking about the future and how if we're better prepared or how we can ramp up preparedness towards this climate change future. If you could come up, I'll start with Andy actually, if you could come up with a transformative, disruptive idea, something that would change how we work for the better, 360 resilience, communities, what would that be?
So there's lots of things, but I think I'll talk about opportunity. I think we do some great work with organisations in the Northeast in partnership. We're really trying to make the most of every pound spent, but we also sometimes miss opportunities, whether it be through engagement with a developer in what they can do or did do in a certain area, or whether I've got an example from a local council where maybe we've paved the road. It looks great. You know, there's nice paving and places to sit, but actually it's probably made things worse. How can we take opportunities and not remove them from kind of a generation of people working in this industry from being used to, you know, making sure we do take that chance, even if it's not, you know, a hugely quantifiable benefit, even if it's just something we know and feel is the right thing to do. And on that journey of nature-based solutions and returning our catchments to how they once were, I think that's the thing to me.
And I think personally, coming originally from a transport engineering background, I totally agree with exactly what you're saying there about we need to be more linked up. We need to be more collaborative working with not just other parts of flood risk management, but other sectors of that public domain of the infrastructure we have. And to be honest, if I got asked this question, I'd say we need to work more with landscape, open spaces and highways to make sure that everything we're putting in has got multiple benefits.
I think we're in a place where, you know, we're not doing as well as we want to do. So let's stop making it worse. Let's do things to start making it better, or make investments, make changes, really work hard.
Let's lean into betterment, because I think betterment is sometimes a dirty word. No betterment. It's like, no, we want betterment. We want that extra additional resilience. Karen, what about you?
Yeah, I'm not sure this is disruptive or not, but I think for me, it's just having that consistency of policy and approach. I mean, how many times have we come away from things like the COP in Glasgow and thinking, yep, we're all signed up, we're on it, we're leaders. And then you might get the latest speech where actually they're going to reverse on things, or they're not quite doing this, or it's not quite going to happen. And you feel like, just please do what you said you were going to do and actually put the money here and follow through with these pledges. Don't just backtrack. And don't every 4 or 5 years, we might have a change of government, change of ministers numerous times within that cycle, which just means you don't know where you are and where you stand. And we're going out talking to the public about, we've got this money from government, we're doing this research, we're looking at how we can do this, and then it'll be on the agenda, it'll be an option for having kelp as, part of our defence, and they'll put money in. And then the next day you might get a government announcement saying something that contradicts, and it's really, really frustrating. So for me, in an ideal world, it would be around just following through with the pledges, with the announcements, regardless of whatever governments have it, all party agreements, that kind of thing, and just making it easier, especially in the marine world. It's very, very difficult to get your licenses, to get your consents, regardless of, a consent for a massively exaggerated here, and I'll be pulled up, but an oil rig might be the same as a consent for a seagrass bed.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. So make things very easy. And I know Crown Estate and others are working hard on this, but make it easy and don't backtrack on things.
And I totally agree with the policy as well there. Lead local flood authorities have to have something called a flood risk management strategy, which basically that outlines the responsibilities the council has as lead local flood authority and how it intends to deliver them. Now, I've wrote these in the past and in the process of writing one again, and from starting from first draft to second draft, there will be a policy change.
Yeah.
And you need to write it. You need to have one every 6 years. You need to review it. But for example, from the last one, we've had, and this is just off my head, it's not necessarily everything. We've had the Environment Act in 2020. Yeah. We've had the National Flood and Coastal Risk Management Strategy from the Environment Agency. We're having changes to Schedule 3, but also as well, stakeholders and partners like Northumbrian Water, they've got a new 25-year plan up. We've got a drainage and wastewater management plan.
Align them all together.
Yeah, and then we've got
to the highest standard possible.
All these differences.
WINEP, Water Industry Natural Environment Programme. And
there's
all
catchment
of these
plans, as this, as that.
Yeah,
it's like,
catchment plans, local plans. That's just national. And then we've got what we've got. We've all signed up to climate change emergencies. We've all got our net zero plans. We've all got with local plans that inform where we're going to develop, and all of that's got to go into one document. The month you put that out, something changes. And we are evolving as a sector nationally, locally, and then we've got Brexit to add on top of that as well. So I totally agree with your suggestion there of kind of let's have some policy and stick to it and see it through.
I mean, I was going to get stuck into Michael Pitt when you said about the different, but we've had a really good conversation. So thank you so much. Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Karen. It's been a brilliant chat. Plenty of content, plenty of things to refer back to. So yes, it's been great sitting down with both of you.
Brilliant. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Evans.
Thanks for listening to the PGN podcast today. We hope you found it informative and enjoyable. If you did, please like and subscribe to the podcast. But also, please, if you find this useful to anyone else, pass it on and spread the word.
To find out more about Project Groundwater Northumbria, please visit www.pgn.org.uk.